Thank you to all my esteemed panelists for being a part and for RAI to give us a chance to speak about this topic. I'll dive directly into the topic because it's such a large topic. And I think Venkat and the team that was before us has set up such a great platform for us to take this forward. So you guys all heard about the fact that they talked about the changing role of HR. What we're going to try and do today is put a little bit of a context around something that Shefta said, which is the workforce planning aspect. And what we'll do is we'll try and start by just setting up what does that really mean, and then go to the panelists and get their viewpoints on certain practices that you guys can take away and help you to do the same thing in your organizations. So welcome everyone, and let's go. So I think one of the things that at least I picked up from the previous session and what I've been seeing over the last maybe 20 months is that there is a massive amount of change that's happening across economies. And the beauty with a change in economy is the change in what we call workforce planning. I remember in the earlier days at McDonald's, workforce planning was actually called strategic workforce planning. But if you now look back, it was actually about numbers, and it was actually exceedingly tactical at that point. So the one thing that we see is that there is an evolution, and it is getting to be a lot more complex. I think the change has been phenomenal, but we need to now contextualize it in terms of what impacts the business. The classical question that I saw being asked across multiple HR forums, multiple HR meetings, was how does HR get a seat at the table? The time is actually now. Because the last 20 months has taught us one simple thing. HR cannot be in isolation of the business. And actually, if you go back to, go to look at it, a critical part of setting workforce planning is really being able to work with the business to set up the strategic angles. So if you don't set your foundation right, which is really what is the purpose of the organization, what are we really doing here, how do we make sure that everyone's joined to being able to come forward to implement the plan, that part is the first part of workforce planning to my mind today. Earlier, that was a strategy person's role who sat in another team, potentially marketing. It's no longer as clear-cut as that. HR today has to play a really, really stringent part in being able to articulate that piece, balance between organization and employee, right? Once you've done that, and this was a question that always amused me actually, was we had a lot of we had a lot of sessions where we said, oh, you know what, we need to define purpose. And then there was a huge amount of English, and it actually became a thesaurus. Today, when I look at purpose, I think it's about actionability and what do you need to do as an organization that will help direct all actions of the organization. But once you've done that purpose statement, moving into how to execute it, which is really about setting up the resources, data, technology, what kind of skills do we need? What kind of workforce should we have, comes after we've set up the foundation and is really a part of the resourcing that's required. Again, purely in HR's bucket, right? And finally, I think this GV touched upon very broadly was how does workforce planning create value, which is really around measurement, it is around implementation, and it's finally around business outcomes. These are the three big components when I look at workforce planning. And it's really around how do we as HR set these up effectively, first by identifying where the problems are at, and then by getting into solutioning for those problems. With that, I'm just going to move over to the team and actually start the question. So I'm hoping the context was not too complicated. But let's start with Rahul. Rahul, what do you think as you look into the future, and if you look at these three buckets, what are the challenges that you faced at Trent?
The major challenge from the workforce planning perspective is the dichotomy that one has to deal with, whether you need people from the capability standpoint recruited ahead of time. That means when you become 10x, how your organization would look like, how the business would look like. And you get people who will be able to run the organization when it is already at that scale. Or you look at just short-term view of capability and get people who can deliver in their current role. You know, the fine balance between the two is always a challenge that we have been grappling with when it comes to the current organization context, because when you go and recruit people who can shorten my learning curve, who can, be hired ahead of time, then it has an implication on cost. When I look at cost, then I will always be looking at business from the myopic standpoint and not look at, okay, how I will look like when I'll be a 500 store company. Okay, what are the capabilities needed to run that scale? And in retail, you only do well when you grow in scale. So this is the fine balance, and this is the challenge that we are still grappling with. I'm not claiming that I have an answer, but if you ask me in short, this is the one.
Wow, you went for the hard-hitting one. I'm sure this is what's on top of everybody's mind, not just yours. So we will come back to that, and we're going to have you talk about how you dealt with this particular problem. Adhir, how about you? What are the challenges that you've been seeing at your end with Raymond's?
I think just before I get into the specifics of the organization, let me just give a perspective of where I am actually coming from. I think I read a report as early as 2018 on the fact that it was a Mercer report, I guess. It was a global talent study which was done. And I think then they predicted that about 20% of the roles will get extinguished, or they'll cease to operate by 2022. And in fact, lo and behold, the pandemic has pushed that into that state already. I mean, I don't know whether they were kind of futurist and they were actually predicted it that accurately, but I think that's what it is, and it's just fallen on us. A couple of things which will happen probably is basically workforce planning from a context and an element standpoint would be driven by, in the context of the economy, where are we actually? It will be completely outside in focus, because when I say outside, what's the model of business that's going to evolve over a period of time? And that will actually drive some of the strategies of workforce planning that you will actually have to kind of drive in the organization. Because if you are trying something like an Omni, you're going to go e-commerce way, you're going to be phygital, etc., that will determine where and how you actually need to drive your planning, the workforce planning process to. I think clearly, as I see, and the challenges I see has been ambiguous times for all of us, okay? But a couple of things which kind of are very, very critical for us to actually look at when you do workforce planning. Of course, the build and buy dimension always remain, but I think there's a new dimension which all of us will have to explore when we actually start doing a planning process on the workforce side, is the borrow and bought. What I mean by that is typically, are we actually having different staffing models, like gig models that will be in contingency, etc., those kind of things. And also, how will your technology insertion happen in the entire process of the business, which will actually drive some of these areas that we are looking at from a planning perspective. I think also the other fact is, one of the new capabilities Rahul just alluded to some time back is that once we have a business model clarity, we'll know exactly where we want to go. Then the dimension of capability is very, very clear for us as to what we want to drive forth. If you're a traditional organization trying to move the digital way, what is the approach that you ought to take, etc., is very, very key and important. In our own case, for example, we were not heavily e-commerce based, but we have moved in the last 3, 4, 5 years. I think therefore the challenges are very different when we look at a pure play e-com player versus the kind of digital setup that we have currently. So I think it will largely be driven by the business approaches and the business strategy, and therefore it will be purely an outside in perspective, which will drive the entire piece of planning that we want to do from a people standpoint, or from a workforce standpoint. Because if you are following a very different business model, it will actually mean that you need to rejig to actually address the need of the business then.
Okay. Wow, these are all immensely large challenges that we're now going to have to also give solutions to.
Yeah.
Parinita, how about you?
Solutions, but yeah, we'll have to collectively.
At least something.
Thank you, Seema. And what a question that all of us are exploring. I think somewhere it's heartening to see that the problem is not just, it's not resting with one individual alone, but collectively it's there in different shapes and form with every organization. And in a way, before I start answering the question, let me share one quote. And this was actually said by the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, in some years ago when he was doing the World Economic Forum opening speech in Davos. And it really stuck with me because what he said stays so relevant to where we are. And what he said was this: the pace of change that has been, it has never been this fast, and yet it will never be this slow again. And if we actually think about that in totality, it is calling out so much enormous opportunities and the potentials that we need to explore to be relevant in the future. I think just talking about IKEA, one of the things that we have now anchored very strongly in ourselves is that change is inevitable and that disruptions is continuing to be a reality and will continue to be a reality with us. And how do we, in this scenario, how do we ensure that we are staying relevant to the needs of our customers, making sure that it's convenient for our coworkers to meet our customers, even as we are continuing to upgrade and readapt and rechange ourselves rapidly. And when I bring it to the talent standpoint, I think one of the areas that actually both Rahul and Adir, they talked about it, is in terms of, the cost part, of course, is there. It is about what are we trying to address and what are we trying to meet. But maybe three things that I may call out as challenges that I see for myself right now. One, how do we ensure that we are bringing the workforce relevant for the future at the right time, at the right place, for the right purpose, with the needed competence in order that they can deliver to happy customers? The second part, the nature of jobs are changing. On one hand, we know that some jobs will not be necessary in the future. However, there will be some jobs which are going to change significantly, and there will be new jobs that's going to come up, which today we don't even know about. So how do we ensure that we can recognize those possibilities and opportunities? And I think last but not the least, something that stays with me is that amidst all of this, how do we stay responsible towards our people? How do we ensure that we are staying responsible towards their livelihoods? How are we staying responsible towards gender equality? A lot of organizations have taken steps towards that. I know, a reality amongst all of us is in the pandemic times, we are seeing impact happening there. But as we progress in the future, how do we ensure we keep that inclusion as well? And how do we ensure that, we collaborate with our coworkers to ensure that we are being able to innovate to be relevant for the future? So those are some of the thoughts that I have with me, but maybe if I summarize the sharing right here, and some wise person actually shared this with me, saying that the humankind has actually gone through lots of industrial revolutions and they've gone through it. So I truly believe that, if this is the fourth industrial revolution of what we are going through, which is spearheaded by automations and digitization and AI and, and the sorts, I'm sure we'll be able to navigate through that as well and collaborate with good collaboration and responsibility. So those are the thoughts that I have for now.
Thank you. That was also superbly intense. I'm actually trying to figure out how to do this all in 30 minutes. Thank you for making my job so easy. Mukta, let's hear from you, and I hope you make my life a little easier.
I will try to, Seema. Thank you so much. I think I relate with what has been said so far. I think organizations' context have evolved significantly over the last many months. And as organizations have evolved, our way of working, our people practices, a lot has changed over the past many months. But what has remained a common thread is that our people continue to serve the customers. So how do you kind of continue to drive that empathy within the organization towards the evolving customer preferences? Because our customers have also evolved through all of this. And as organizations continue to change, how do you kind of build your proposition that remains relevant to its people who then continue to kind of, serve our happy customers, as Seema just, touched upon. So of course, lots of factors to be considered, whether it's cost, whether it's what are those evolving capabilities and skills we need to kind of think about for the future. And how do you also enable leaders to be that, future forward? Because we need some of that thinking to come up front. But no one's got a playbook to deal with this, and no one knows how quickly things are going to look and feel so very different that we need to continuously, find that time to say, okay, how do we think this is going to evolve? Do a bit of that thinking, collective, intellectual that we need to kind of rely on and build within the organizations as well, because we don't know everything. And if I may say, the hybrid working has also kind of brought a huge change from a standpoint of how do we sustain our cultures and just questioning ourselves to say, what do we stand for? We are attracting very different talent to what existed in the business. How are we enabling their success? How are we ensuring that our existing colleagues get the opportunity, whether through experience or exposure, to upskill themselves and continue to, remain relevant to the future needs of the business? The burnout that we are seeing everywhere, I think, in the previous panel, someone spoke beautifully about psychological allowance, right? So how are we creating that? And I think the cultural thread and the evolving role of leadership, to me, are probably two important factors that are also going to impact the strategic workforce planning, in addition to all that has been spoken by the fellow panelists.
Thank you. Ramandeep, just rounding up the challenges, I think we've talked a lot about the foundation, we've talked about the operating parts of it. Do you have any thoughts or any challenges that you specifically saw around the outcomes and measurement side of it?
Yeah, thank you. So I will continue with what Mukta has spoken, and two distinct points from my side. One is on saying, okay, our business and technology life cycles are becoming shorter, and we don't graduate before we move to the next. So this is creating obviously a big challenge. And so what it means for each one of us is there is a huge depth of talent. So when I say talent, not talent in terms of a person, two hands and a mind, it is in terms of the depth of the experience. So there is a huge demand, especially in the areas of technology, in the area of automation, process, e-commerce, everywhere, all these new parts of the industry. There is a huge dearth of, I will say, a proper experience, and there is a huge demand. That creates a huge amount of pressure on us in HR. Okay, how do we get that? When we get that, and how do we retain that? Because there is so much of a demand, even if we are proactively planning numbers, bringing a lot of dynamic approach in terms of technology or forecasting, it is not going to be enough. It is always going to be a great challenge how to deal with that. Second piece, which relating to Mukta, what she mentioned, how do we make ourselves saying, okay, more answerable and putting us on the table is saying, okay, we talk about a lot of our processes like succession planning, talent insight. How do we bring a measurability to that? We have been talking about it for long, these processes, which seems to be kind of not getting maturer to the extent of getting measured. So that's another very big challenge. This is going to help us a lot. The talent fungibility is going to come with that. If we are able to train, pre-train, reskill our people, that's going to be very, very important. So in addition to the points mentioned by my co-panelists, I think these are two distinct points which I feel are going to be very, very important in the times to come. Interesting times.
Yes, they are. I think part of if I look at all the panels and all the years that one has spoken, I find that this year is probably the closest that I've heard, the full business conversation coming through. And I think it'll be, really helpful that we just take a couple of the points that we've discussed and actually break it down to specific practices so that, we can help everyone who's attending walk away with at least two key takeaways. One of the areas that I think that I heard very heavily being talked about was outside in thinking. I think, Raman, you touched upon demand versus supply. Parinita touched upon a relevant workforce for the future. I think Mukta touched upon the whole, how do you build more empathy towards consumer preferences? As you look at this, and I think Rahul touched upon the big one right at the start, how do you balance the dichotomy in terms of today versus tomorrow? Sorry about that. Which brings to fore that one of the biggest challenges I think businesses have faced is cost versus capability. I'm going to kind of ask you, Ramandeep, to talk about some of the things that you faced in the supply chain side of things and how you've managed to balance the cost versus capability challenge.
Yeah, this is something which we have been dealing with that for the last couple of years as we graduate more from traditional mode of storage to a semi-automatic to a more automatic and many more solutions coming in. And with increasing globalization, I think, on an everyday basis, the new technologies are coming up. So there is always a dichotomy of saying, okay, how do I invest in these technologies, which at the start, they are at the peak of their pricing? And what is the advantage which I am going to get it? But however, if I look at the long term, there is no other solution other than going the technology route, especially with the scale, the kind of scale the organizations are looking at. There is no other answer other than technology. So there are many other things which we tried doing during this period. Obviously, one is, train your people a lot for different kind of processes. What is the mode which you are going to utilize? All these up-country locations, we have multiple challenges. The remoteness of the location, the education of the profiling of these people, and taking the technology to those places, saying, okay, till 3 years back, there was not enough bandwidth available in terms of the technology or the telecom, saying, okay, how do we run all these systems? And then important part of all these distribution centers or the fulfillment centers, they are increasingly becoming technology hubs. And they are kind of a manufacturing unit, like a manufacturing unit employing 300 to 500 kind of a manpower. So how do you do their learning and development? So all these are challenges which we dealt in the last few years, tried bringing a lot of learning labs to these places. And the remoteness we have dealt with, saying, okay, what are the kind of engagements you can work it out for the people to stay there and create, the more longevity into their tenures with the organization. Second piece which we tried doing was we looked at, experimented a lot on the gig model, looked at saying, okay, though there is a lot which we need to introspect and lot we need to learn. We have not excelled in this area, but there is a lot of scope there which we have done an experimentation on the gig model. It serves your purpose during the peak days, during the peak requirements, how these people come into the various stages of your operations. Third piece, which I can think of is, there are a lot of these government schemes which are available, NAPs, NEEMs. We don't know enough about it. While the conditions are not very, very easy to implement all these schemes, but look at the scale. If at that scale, if you are able to implement all these schemes, they are very, very cost effective to the organization, not only from the organization's point of view, but also from the larger strata of the society. They are able to get employed. Those opportunities, we take those opportunities to their doorsteps. that's a bigger part of these schemes. Similarly, we are also kind of experimenting with saying, okay, today there is a cost of running all our delivery initiatives through electrical vehicles. But there is a larger responsibility towards the cost as well as the environment. How you take care of your carbon content, that's also a contribution to the society. So there are various ways. It's a diversity of your thoughts in terms of how you bring that balance in the costing to what kind of initiatives you are achieving. So these are few things which I wanted to bring to the table, which we have
Sure.
experimented in the last couple of years.
Sure, thank you so much. That gives pretty much specific stuff to do. Rahul, when I look at it from your perspective and the bomb you threw on now versus tomorrow, what are some of the things that you've done, at Trent that have helped you to be able to manage that?
Okay. See, workforce planning is just not planning of numbers, but as I was mentioning, it is a planning of capabilities that you need today and tomorrow. And these capabilities become extremely challenging in the light of new normal. When you talk about hybrid, when you talk about work from home, so a couple of things that we attempted doing in last 18 months, and there has been enough learning, is, how do you institutionalize work from home? What it takes to do that. And our learning is that, the trust amongst colleagues and management teams is extremely crucial for that. How do you get leaders on board who can build that enabling environment? As Mukta was talking about, how do you bring purpose on the center stage? And you see people win over their personal hardships. You've seen that be very often how you trust your colleagues and your team members is a function of how you have been brought up in your career. The guilt element when you work from home, the unconscious bias towards people. How do you really address that? And we have been putting a lot of time, efforts, money, me and my HR team in building that awareness amongst our people managers in order to build this trust and empathy element, because this will play an extremely important role when it comes to workforce planning in today's scheme of things. Be leveraging on digital. We have institutionalized a chatbot, which connects with employees at different intervals in their tenure. For new joinees between 30 days, 45 days, 90 days. And it keeps asking questions and seeks responses at a dynamic level. So if one says that I'm not happy at this particular, I don't know what I'm expected at work. After 45 days, the same chatbot reaches out. Hey, did you get any response on that? Did your manager reach out to you? Because that data comes and sits with us. And then the HR team works on that and connects with the line managers that, hey, your team member is. So you're anticipating the engagement issues. That's where you're making some of the jobs redundant because you are leveraging on digital. How do you ensure that the conversations are not just task oriented when it comes to managers and their team members, and that it also takes care of the softer aspects of relationship. So these are the different scheme of things that the teams have worked upon in order to build a very effective and capable workforce. Because when we go in the market and ask for, get applications, this is what we want to, capitalize upon. And being a Tata Group, I think the culture, the trust, I think that is given and we need to capitalize on that. Cost, yes, I talked about that. When you take people ahead of time, there's an implication of cost. But then one has to look at cost not just as a cost, but also as a talent magnet, right? And that's the work that we do constantly with businesses, with CFOs. And I'm not there that we are there fully, but as far as we are traveling that journey, I'm sure at some point of time we will be there where we are expected to be. Thanks, Seema.
No, I'm sure as long as we're thinking about it, we'll reach there. Parinita, from your point of view, you obviously work for an organization that's global, and I'm sure they've seen different challenges around the world. Is there anything that you'd like to bring forth around the cost versus capability conversation?
Absolutely, Seema. And one of the things that we've noticed in IKEA, no matter which markets that we are working in, it's the same conversations and challenge. I think when we talk about people, it's interesting that the expectations that we will have from the future workforce is immense. You know, we want them to be adaptable, we want them to be agile. And yet, when it comes to translating that on what does it mean to invest in people, there's always a discussion that follows around cost. But having said that, I think a couple of practices that I could share where we are then investing today in a way, and also in IKEA, the entire transformation journey of course got accelerated with the pandemic. But usually we were the standard blue box organizations. We've completely diversified into omni-channel. So yes, the pandemic did accelerate our transformations, but we are still not done. We know that, and Mukta, that you were saying that the customer demands are changing. We notice that our customers want to be met wherever they are and whenever they want to. So, one of the things that we, maybe 3 examples that I could share. One was a little around cross-skilling that we may say. So when the pandemic hit us and the stores were closed, we still had omni-channel or e-commerce going on. And again, attracting talent became very difficult. So how do you bring in the talent, who will be able to support? So overnight, we were cross-skilling our co-workers. Our co-workers who were working in the IKEA restaurant, they were then supporting when there were peaks happening for the e-commerce. Similarly, our contact centers, they no longer do contact, just to give an update about customer orders. They can do personal shopping with you. They can actually design and redesign your kitchens and your bedrooms. So they are also moving in the value chain in terms of not just responding to a query, but actually doing cross-skilling, selling, and all of that actually doing it remotely. The second big thing that we are doing and working with is to broaden the workforce. The workforce and the talent challenges are going to continue. That's not going anywhere. One of the things that we've realized in the India workforce is that the employability of the workforce when they enter the markets is not really there. And with what we've learned in the pandemic, we are no longer, or let's say we are trying to offer different ways that people can work with us. So if you don't want to work for 5 days a week, and if you want to work only for 2 days a week, or if you want to work only for 3 days a week, if you are wanting to work for 5 hours a day and not, the complete setup, we will be able to broaden the workforce. We can attract students, we can attract mothers who are coming back into the workplace. We can attract retired co-workers, who just want to be gainfully occupied, but not be employed for the full spectrum. So that was another thing that we are doing in terms of broadening the workforce, because that's also something that is needed. And I think and the last part is, and something I think Ramandeep, you mentioned, building workforce. I think it becomes so important. There are private organizations and government organizations that are actually investing or supporting segments of the society for skill development. At IKEA, we are in the second, generation of that skill development program. We've actually tied up with Tata Strive to skill develop underprivileged youth that they can enter the retail workforce. So I think it's also important for us to be able to, work with what we have. Of course, invest in skilling and cross-skilling and upskilling, as we may call it, but also important that we broaden the workforce and find new ways of being able to attract them to contribute into the industry and to the economy. And I think those are good arguments that our CEOs and CFOs should support for investment into human capital.
Well, I'm sure they do. I think we've touched upon quite a few points around this, and so just summarizing that piece, I think one is about building the workforce through government, various government schemes that we have. Two-pronged effort, one obviously on making sure that you have a constant supply of people, but on the other side also the community impact, as Ramandeep touched upon. I think the second point that I picked up, which was very heavily there, is how do you upskill and cross-skill? Because when times are tough, it becomes easier to be able to still have a gainfully employed workforce. You also touched a little bit about the part-time piece and how we can actually change the employment contract. And finally, I think, Rahul touched upon a very key point, which is how do we gather data to be able to know where problems are at and actually then attend to those problems effectively. So the use of technology in being able to actually hone in on where the problems within our staff are to make sure that we're using the maximum effectiveness of people and still balancing the human side of it. Okay, but so technology obviously has played a very big role in the first part of our conversation. But with that, there also comes this huge need to retrain and reskill people. In a country where there isn't a huge amount of penetration when it comes to smartphones. Of course, Jio's changed the way data works. But there is still a miss when it comes to smartphone penetration. Adil, I wanted your view on, how have you looked at technology and reskilling and retraining a lot of your people, where technologies maybe taken away some jobs. We've had certain changes in the workforce. How have you managed that internally?
A good question, because I think it was not just primarily because of pandemic, but about 3 years back, we took a very different call to actually have entire suite of products on your product training, etc., completely digitized for us. So in fact, this has come very handy for us in this particular period. About 3 years back, I remember when we took a call to digitize and it's not just an e-learning platform, it's actually live product training. So I think we cut off the entire physical touch of people. And we have a tool called the One Button Connect, which our learning team had developed then, where the whole of product training, the soft skills, etc., has been done online for the last 3 years before pandemic. And when the entire thing hit us of pandemic, it was a blessing in disguise for us. I mean, we had not necessarily thought about pandemic, but we thought about from a cost standpoint, and also the delivery and the reach, and also the fact that availability of training on demand, so to speak. So this is one way which we actually have dealt with this particular from a skilling standpoint. I think while shops were closed, etc., we had used this particular process to actually retrain our people, trying to do something very, very different and we already had that tool with us. Also on the business front, we do a lot of programs called Home Assist. Again, these are through technology, where our front-end employees actually go to the as conscious service houses to sell products and what have you. So I think we had to retrain and kind of re-energize people to actually do a different model of selling as opposed to just the people standing in the shops and kind of advocating our products. But typically, that was another thing which we introduced. I think on the HR side, typically in the last 1 year, we have actually changed. We haven't had a changeover of technology. And I think I'm happy to note and share here, we moved from a very large, big elephant technology to a very nimble and fast-footed technology, which we are in usage. And I think also Rahul also alluded to the fact that we have a similar product, which was to do with the bots, which has actually started answering queries on a routine basis of people. And it has got a moodometer to actually understand moods of people and so on and so forth. So I think the biggest change that we did in technology was to actually look at a shift changeover from a particular vendor to a B particular vendor. And this all happened in the pandemic. I mean, that's something which I'm proud of the team has executed this phenomenally well in what we've done in the last 18 months or so. Having said that, I think one of the other pieces that I wanted to share is that whilst we need to go high tech, the high touch element should not be missed out. I think that's very, very important, because as HR fraternity, as HR professionals, we will tend to sometimes gloss over technology and the benefits, and all of us are aware of it. But I think the fundamental piece of our touch and touching employees' lives is an important aspect, which probably need to be balanced with high tech and a high touch. The other part I would suggest is that when we are not used to managing, and none of us were, in fact, not me alone, but all of us sitting on this panel were not used to managing how to work remote, etc. We started a slew of programs right up front through technology to actually help managers understand how do I manage teams remotely. We're not an organization completely on remote, right? So there are a lot of initiatives which are taken to actually kind of embrace technology and make sure that managers are aware of what needs to be done. But the biggest factor according to me, and I think Rahul also touched based on, is the fact that how do you help build trust when you're working remote? I think those are important aspects which probably are softer but very difficult aspects to actually look at the context of the organization that we both have manufacturing, the front end sales. So an old economy organization, a new age world. So I think marrying these two kind of businesses, one vertical, sometimes becomes very, very difficult. So therefore, the trust element becomes important for us and once you drive some of these programs. In fact, the home from work or the hybrid model is here to stay for us, because I don't think we are going away from it very soon, so to speak. Having said that, there are pulls and pressures that are within the system. So how much do we do for a manufacturing setup as opposed to some retail front end, etc., and so forth. But on the whole, if I have to summarize some things of this kind, I think technology for us has been a driver and an enabler for us to change many things. I think both at the front end or the business end as well as in HR. And the newer things that we are talking about in technology will help us take it to the next level. Having said that, the sub part of technology, I think what I would just want to lay forth with the people here is that I think someone also mentioned, I think GRV mentioned about analytics. I think on the scale, the scale that we look at, diagnostic and descriptive are given for us. It has to be predictive and prescriptive for us to move ahead in the game. I think if we are not there at all, I think we'll be lost in the race to actually get some meaningful insight out of technology and help kind of get certain data which is kind of actionable, etc. So therefore, technology for me should be actionable in terms of it's not just a fancy tool, but it actually throws out actionable insights at a predictive and prescriptive level. So I think if organizations are not there as yet, I think it's hard time that we need to do a catch up for us to actually be very, very close to getting business challenges addressed through people agenda or people insights that we want to get out of the technology. So these are some of the thoughts which I thought are important for us to actually understand as we actually grapple. It's not that everything is hunky-dory. Let me just be frank with you that we are also on the learning curve. And it's not that whatever change that we have done on technology is 100% out there. But I think the bold step that we took as an organization in the midst of an ambiguous situation, we took a chance, not a chance, a calculated approach to change over to a very, very nimble and fast agile system, which has started paying dividends as we speak today. But that decision of changing over in a very, very, uncertain times was very key for us as an organization to actually come closer to people to help get understanding of what we are going to do from a people technology standpoint as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, Adhir. Mukta, over to you. So, while Adhir and a lot of the others have spoken about all the benefits that, technology has been able to give us in this hybrid situation, one of the things that at least concerns me personally is there could be, these are jobs that were earlier done by people. And, to me, technology is just really putting processes online that have always existed offline. Now, when you have these people who are doing these jobs, what have you done in Marks and Spencer to be able to rescale or upgrade those people and their jobs?
A very pertinent question, Seema. A lot of people actually get overwhelmed when new technology is introduced in the organization. And it's extremely important to ensure that we manage the change of introducing new technology through constant communication and taking away the fear of technology, as well as the uncertainty it puts in terms of processes and whether they're going to be done by humans or it's going to be automated. So for us, we've also gone through a lot of automation across our processes at the store, our processes at the DC, at the warehouse. I think all of us have gone through that change journey over the last many months. And what we've done is we've ensured we've taken our people along that journey and continued to upskill them. Now, of course, technology also plays a role in the way Adhir said, right? Having an LMS platform itself enables you to deliver more opportunity to upskill and reskill. So I think we've managed to leverage that to a point where we've spoken and expressed how important evolution of technology and integrating that in our business processes is important and the business case for it, and made the journey of people adapting to that technology as well simpler by offering learning at fingertips and ensuring that people managers continue to engage with colleagues in a manner that there is continuous exchange of thoughts, ideas, and feedback. a lot of times there's also angst that gets built in, because initially when you introduce technology, for a certain period, the workload actually goes up till it tapers down. So, all hands on call, ensuring you have cross-functional teams put together that are continuously testing and then, kind of training people. So if I look at examples of order management system getting introduced, or a new RFID, piece kind of getting introduced in stores, we've taken our people along to say, these are coming, be prepared, but we'll enable you through the journey, and engaging them through that process of change and delivering those programs. Because at the end of the day, there is something or the other that we can find them to do, as long as we're upskilling them. So I think just that in clarity of intent from a leadership standpoint, to say we are introducing technology only to enable us to emerge stronger, not really, to kind of eliminate human or people doing those tasks. So I think that builds confidence in saying, let's adapt and go through that change. But additionally, Seema, I think what we've also started to emphasize a lot on is that, functional skills also are now evolving. What you knew or you were an expert of earlier may not necessarily be a place where you start to grow your career. So there are certain master skills, I think, that are now enabling people to kind of be more agile in tweaking their own functional skills. Now, whether that's a focus on, say, problem solving, Adhir and many of us spoke about data handling. All of these have become such critical skills at a ground level that are only going to help us improvise our functional skills. So how do you create an ecosystem where you're building a safety to say, we are doing this for the better future of the business, and ensure that we're able to upskill you in a manner that you think about those broader skills as against just focusing on functional skills? While we realize that we don't need everyone to be a general manager, right? We need certain SME skills as well. Hence, you need to be able to provide platforms where people can continue to learn through the series of education, exposure, and experience in aspects that are going to continue to remain relevant to people. And ensuring that, as I said, I think repeating myself, but taking people along through that and expressing to them to say why this is important is a very integral part of driving this whole change and transformation that is built on technology nowadays.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. All right. I think we're coming up to the last 5 minutes. We have a couple of audience questions. And what I'm going to do is just maybe just throw it out there, and one of you can take it up. So one of the questions is, what challenges do you foresee HR managers facing in the future? How should they be prepared for the same? This is going to be a fastest finger first question.
Yeah, I think first of all, there's no right answer or a wrong answer, but typically it's a mindset game in terms of, I think the only change is going to be, only constant is going to be change, right? So I think building our own resilience and the mindset to adapt to changes is going to be an important quality that we need to imbibe as HR, not just HR, but any professional. And I think accepting the fact that, these are transient things, this will happen to us, but I think accepting wholeheartedly through a mindset, typically to embrace change, is going to be a very critical determining factor for any profession, not just HR, to actually embrace whatever is happening in the future. I mean, future is, I do not know what is going to happen in the next 3 months, probably, as we sit here. So I think, therefore, that ability to navigate and adapt to change very easily and being very comfortable with change is going to be the foremost thing for us to manage things in the future.
Sure. Thanks, Adhir. Rahul?
Yeah, two things, Seema. I mean, how the function is taking lead, in order to show how future of work looks like in the organization. I think that's the HR responsibility, and B, create and sustain culture, DNA that will help companies to succeed in this new future of work. I think these are the two things which HR can take the responsibility, and of course, becoming a role model in this.
Thank you. Parinita, you want to add to that?
I think in all of this, there will be a lot of change and transition which will be happening. But as HR professionals, I think it's also important to stay rooted. Stay rooted to your culture, stay rooted to your purpose. Because when the going gets tough and when, a lot happens around you, that will actually help you find the direction. So as an organization, always have that.
That's a really tough one to do when the business is telling you something different. So, but yeah, I would agree that that's a very, very critical one. Mukta, any last thoughts from you for the group?
Yes, I think from an HR manager or from a role of HR standpoint, I think the whole psychological safety and allowing that empathy from a people standpoint to kind of remain deeply rooted in our roles. As you said, Seema, a lot of roles are being taken over by technology, and it's not a distant thing to say we'll all be working with robots alongside. And what's going to separate robots to humans is that emotional intelligence and empathy. And I think HR has a very key role to kind of ensure that that is carried forward in the businesses.
Thank you so much. Ramandeep, your thoughts?
Very clearly, technology is going to be the very, very important pillar. And HR needs to understand technology more. Being an expert in that is going to be very, very important. Not just understanding just for the sake of everyone is talking about technology. I think just getting completely integrated with technology is going to be the biggest challenge for HR. Second piece I firmly believe is HR needs to very consistently start delivering a value from the function standpoint, where we talk about sitting on the right-hand side of the CO. I think we need to become very fast our subject matter experts to guide the senior leadership in terms of the talent requirements. So this is my take on that.
Thank you so much. Just, one last point for me. If you guys all want to check out, you should check out the new HR competencies that have just been released by Dave Ulrich and Norm Smallwood. This is the 8th set of competencies that they've released, and it's actually really interesting when you read the evolution. They've actually covered pretty much what the panel has talked about as far as what the HR professionals require. But when you look at workforce planning, a lot of it is that you have to be there from the end to the end. We're no longer just about the emotional and touch and feel. And so I think it's about upskilling and reskilling ourselves to the business and the consumer, and then bringing it forward into the organization. With that, sorry, anyone had any last points? Otherwise, I'm going to sign off.
No, I think just a last point I want to make. I think the whole concept of VUCA has to be changed completely. I mean, we should stand, for the vision, that we recrafted vision, etc. You should stand for an understanding, C for a clarity, and A for adaptability. That's the VUCA turned upside down, is what will help all of us in the future, not just HR, but the entire fraternity and the entire professional work that we are, professional arena that we're working in. So I think if you actually recraft your vision, you actually have understanding of the context in which we are operating, and C for clarity rather than confusion and complexity, and A for adaptability. The mindset that you get with to turning VUCA upside down is going to be very key for us to be successful in the future.
Thank you so much, Adeep. Thank you, all of you, for being a part of this panel and taking the time and all the prep that's gone into it.